Hi, everybody, and welcome to another lesson in Tanya. We're not going to go over last week's lesson, even though we're in the middle of the chapter, but just a very brief point. In chapter 31, the Rebbe is addressing melancholy, depression, sadness. There are many, many words, but they all express the same thing, which is the depletion of energy. No energy to do, to interact, to socialize, to be creative. The Rebbe started with a question. Last chapter 30th, the Rebbe speak about how to anger ourselves against the evil inclination by chopping off the body, by crushing the body and telling the body you are the worse than any animal, and you need to be humble before any other, in front of every other human being. Chapter 31, the Rebbe is asking, how is it possible? Because when you crush the body, you end up causing the person to be very depressed. There is no hope. I'll never be great. Because no matter how much I climb up the mountain, I'm going to get a zetz, I'm going to get a clap and fall down. And then I'm going to try again and fall. Because that's the nature of the human. The chapter is divided into 4 parts. One is what's wrong, why sadness is bad. The second part is there is a distinction, so that's when we already studied. The second part is there is a distinction the Rebbe makes between bitterness versus sadness. Bitterness equals energy. Sadness equals despair, no energy. And the Rebbe, we studied that part where the Rebbe said that whenever we get depressed, for whatever reason, for good reasons, as I said last week, there are times we lost someone close, we are very sad, 7 days of sadness. There are days of the year in the Jewish calendar we're supposed to mourn. But we need to convert it into bitterness, to energize ourselves, to change, to bring change about ourselves. That is a blessing. The third part the Rabbi is going to talk about is how to convert sadness into bitterness that we're going to be studying today. And the last part, the Rabbi is going to talk about the difference between hope and despair. Because in our life, no matter how successful, how great, how much achievements we have done, there are points in which we fail. No matter what type of person, it may be King David, and maybe the lowest of the law, someone who is sitting in jail for being a serial killer. There are points that are in life that are very high, and there are points in their life that they are very low. What's the difference between despair and hope? Because both of them can be driven based on sadness, based on a painful experience. And that's what the last part, which I'm not sure we're going to reach to today. But there's the third part. So the first thing is what's wrong with sadness. The second is that there is a distinction between sadness and bitterness we studied. The Rabbi today, our topic would be how to convert sadness into bitterness. And as we begin, I'm going to share with you a very short introduction, so it should be easy to read. It goes back to the original idea of the Rebbe, and that is called the hitbonenut, contemplation in my mind. As we studied in Tanya, everything starts from the brains. When I have an emotional expression of kindness or strictness or to be jealous, it all starts from here. I might have the 10 attributes that make me a very jealous person or make me very slow to get angry. That's fine, but it all starts there and it will affect my emotions. So why does God says, love God? How can you command someone to love? And we studied on many occasions, It is the mitzvah to contemplate and study about the greatness of God and how kind He is to us, and that will make us fall in love with God. Says the Rebbe, when someone is sad, they lost their job. Someone is sad, they lost a loved one. In the mind, hitbonenut, with our mindset, we have the power to affect it. We can convert it into bitterness to energize us. We can take it to a good place. And therefore, there is nothing wrong and there is nothing bad that God created. Sadness on its own is part of nature. It's part of what we possess. But it doesn't mean we should allow it to stay, but rather we should convert it to bitterness. How do we do that? With the contemplation. The other part is, and that's I have a story for that, is that in order for us to convert sadness into bitterness is by realizing that we do not have control over everything. We have a body who pulls us down. We have a soul who pulls us up. Whenever we get depressed, whenever we're very sad, it's because my body is pulling me down, because I want to be in control. I want to enjoy life. I want to go on a cruise, but I can't. Now I'm sad. In other words, as soon as I allow my soul to rule, there is no place for sadness at all. We need to, and the rabbi is going to go in deeper, that God had created us as human beings with a body that is the lowest of the low. In other words, if we left alone, the body will be the worst monster ever created. It's in the Torah. Air pere Adam ivoled. The Torah tells us that a human being left without training, without parents and teachers, it will become a wild ass in wilderness that has cannot be tamed, cannot be controlled, will hurt himself, harm his surrounding, and just bring only destruction. That's the human nature. That's the way God created us. Just a minute, let me finish my thought. So that's why we are the only one who need to have training for 12 or 13 years. No other creature needs so much training, because if they are going to kill other animals, they're not doing anything wrong. They will not deviate. Usually, some animals do, but it's because there is something not normal about them. A human being left to their own senses and desires will bring destruction, destroy the universe, destroy the planet. That's the body. The soul is there to refine the body, to tell the body, do what God wants. Don't be in control, because God is in charge. And therefore, if I am able to allow my soul to rule, I'm able to control my body, thus remove sadness and energize myself to doing something good about it. Yes, Herman.
I'm sure there's a combination of sadness and bitterness. And the way to bitterness, you're still sad.
Of course, they're interchanged. However, what the rabbi is saying is the best distinction to know if you're sad or bitter is sadness lets you down. Sadness, I'm not willing to call my family. Sadness, I don't want to go to work. Sadness, I don't want to get out of bed. Bitterness is let me do something to change. Let me connect with family. Let me go to work. Let me cook for someone a meal. Let me interact. And these are two opposites, although they both are from gvura, from strictness. It's a painful, so to say, experience, but one would lead us to connect, to be energized, would energize us. The other get rid of the energy. Are they able to be at the same time? Yes, they do, but it needs to be refined to one way or the other.
Things cause action.
Bitterness will motivate us to action, exactly. If my experience, my feeling is there to remove action, to stop me from socializing, getting out of bed, going to work, getting active, it's sadness. It's not bitterness. Okay? The rabbi, again, is going to tell us that you have a body and you have a soul. If you acknowledge that, then no matter how far we are from God, that causes us to be sad. For example, I don't follow God's commandments. No matter what the reason for us to be sad, the fact that I try to be good, not to get angry and I lose myself, the fact that I'm trying to pray and I cannot bring myself to get up on time and go to synagogue, the fact that I'm saying to myself, respecting others, and then when push comes to shove, we forget. It will help us by realizing that it's the body who's pulling us down. But the soul is there and pure and clean. And therefore, the soul is able to change. So if yesterday wasn't good, today can be better. And the soul is able to tell us, the soul cannot change the body. The soul can force the body by Beinoni. By a tzaddik, there is no the body is subservient to the soul, so it's no problem. But for us, it's a challenge. As long as you allow the soul to rule, the soul will force the body to do what's right. This is one of the ideas that the Rabbi is going to, and we're going to share about other ideas. So, says the Rebbe, we are on page 418. For Atzvut, I'm reading one paragraph earlier or two. For Atzvut means that one's heart is as dull as a stone, and that there is no vitality, arousal, or feeling in his heart. But bitterness, merry root, and contrition are just the opposite. Since the very fact that one is moved to be embittered is itself a sign of life, except that this vitality derives from the holy attributes of severity, gvurot, and it therefore expresses itself in bitterness, whereas joy derives from the holy attributes of kindness, chasadim, for the heart contains both these attributes, kindness and severity. So the Rabbi is saying you can live your life mainly on two lines, either kindness or severity, but both of them can be positive or negative. Kindness is joy, happiness, connect with people. Bitterness is strictness, is gvura, is from severity. However, it can be a motivator to do more, to reconnect, to establish the relationship, etc., and it drives a person to connect to God. At any rate, we see that the dejection accompanying one's disappointment with his spiritual situation stems from the realm of holiness, unlike atzvut, sadness, which derives from klipat noga. So if someone is sad for the purpose of sadness, they are distancing themselves from God because they are trying to be in control. And being in control, you push away God. And therefore is unhappy about the outcome. How come I cannot be in charge? Bitterness is quite opposite. I failed to achieve what I want, but let me try harder. Let me try in a different way, etc. At times, says the Rebbe, one must arouse the holy attribute of severity, gvurot, in order to attempt to temper, literally sweeten, stern judgments, which in this context denote the animal soul and the evil inclination. Whenever the latter dominates, amen, God forbid, for stern judgment, that is, restraints on one's spiritual well-being, can only be sweetened by means of their source. Last week I spoke and shared that just like medicine today, we discovered that the poison itself is the cure or the medicine for someone who's affected with that poison, right? A snake poison allows the body to fight a snake bite. The same is penicillin, I think. You take the same bacteria that comes from a virus and you instill it in the body, and that itself will fight or cause the body to fight the bad virus. Says the Rebbe, in Kabbalah we call it just like the axe that cuts off those trees in the forest. You need a handle. The handle is from wood. The wood itself is the one that aids you to chop off wood, chop off the trees, the source of the wood. In other words, sometimes you got to use the evil inclination tactics and tricks to fight the evil. So the evil inclination best fight to fight a human being is sadness. I'm going to show it you an example soon. And therefore, how do you fight back? With severity, because sadness is from severity. What kind of severity? Bitterness. You get angry. You say, I'm not going to do this way. I'm not going to behave that way. I'm going to do better. I'm going to fight harder. There is a Chassid who said that the evil inclination's trick to cause a man to sin is as simple as he uses a web of a spider web. I use the example of fish because we go fishing, and especially those of us who go fishing far, deep sea fishing, and they go for big marlin or swordfish, or what happens? Sailfish. Once they catch the fish, they're not going to be able to reel the fish because the fish is much more powerful. The fish weighs like 90 pounds, and the fish has the strength and the wings and the flappers. They can fight. So what do? You let the fish fight for an hour, 2 hours. That's what I heard from avid fishermen. For 2 hours, until the fish is so weak, it cannot resist. Anybody is familiar with that? Even Harry knows that, right? Even Harry. Says the rabbi, a spider, when they create a web, they want to catch a fly. When the fly is caught in the web, the spider is not fighting the fly. The spider is waiting for the fly to try and untangle themselves from the web. And they fight and fight and fight and fight until they fall because they lost all energy. That's when the spider comes and it eats it. He has breakfast. In other words, it doesn't need to do much. All it does is take a step back and waits for the fly to fight itself and fall down. In fish, same story. In human, the same story. He gives us a reason to be sad. As soon as he gives us a reason to be sad, we detach ourselves from godliness. That's the most important one. And therefore, we lose ourselves. We detach ourselves from our resource and energy. What happens then? It's easy for us to think evil thoughts. It's easy for us, for the evil inclination to come in and say, you started keeping kosher, you don't have to do it anymore. You go to synagogue to pray every day, forget it, it's okay, God will forgive you. In other words, and you don't fight it back. There is no fight back. Why? Because when a person is sad, he loses his energy. He has no energy to fight back. Imagine, we talked about it 4 chapters earlier, that when you have a match, a boxing match, the fight is only going to be a good fight provided both sides are still having energy. But if one has lost his energy, even a starter, someone who is just started fighting, can knock him down. It's easy because he lost energy. The evil is very smart. He says to the person, get sad. He gives him a reason to be sad, because I'm not as successful as the other. I'm not as healthy as I used to be. I'm not as successful as I wanted to. I did not reach my goals. And it makes a person sad. And once a person is sad and he keeps contemplating about his sadness, after a while, the evil can say to him, you don't need to do that. You don't need to stop eating, stop going to the gym, stop doing what's right. And by doing so, it drives the person worse and worse and worse. Therefore, says the Rebbe, how do you fight it? You give him with his own medicine. Just like the axe has the handle from the tree, and therefore with that you can knock off many other trees. You fight the evil with evilness. What's the evilness? Sadness. But instead of sadness, that despair that gives us no hope, no energy, you take it to other side. enraged. How is it possible that I'm not able to get up like everybody else? I must try 10 minutes earlier. How is it possible that I miss prayer? How is it possible that I did not speak properly? I have to learn and train and spend more time. In other words, you take gevura, severity, and you turn it around to fight the evil. The evil is using it to weaken us. We take the same medicine to energize us and bring us to become better persons. That's what the rabbi is saying. All evil, therefore, says the Rabbi, you use the energy or the technique of the evil to fight the evil. All evil is simply a degenerate form of the attributes of Sephirotic Gvurot that derives from the realm of holiness, myriad contractions, Tzimtzumim, and the sense of these attributes transform it to evil, the evil of Klippa. Naturally, this includes also the Sitra Achad, the other side of one's animal soul, and his evil impulse. In order to elevate or sweeten evil, to return evil to the realm of holiness, it is necessary to bring its source to bear on it. And therefore, in terms of one's divine service, this means crushing one's evil impulse by merry root, bitter remorse, which derives its vitality from the holy attributes of severity, the source of evil impulse. And that's why, for this reason, our sages said, one should always incite the good inclination to anger against the evil inclination. Even though anger is a bad attribute, you're allowed to get angry against your evil inclination. You take an evil attribute, a negative attribute, and you utilize it to fight evil. Since anger stems from the attributes of severity, it is capable of sweetening the evil inclination, and therefore you remove the poison. The word always, one should always incite, is however, says the Rebbe, to be understood in a qualified sense. Joy, not severity, is usually the proper setting for divine service. Thus, when our sages state that one should always incite the good inclination, this means whenever he finds it necessary for himself. As for example, when one sees that the arrogance of his animal soul does not permit the light of his divine soul to penetrate his heart, causing timtum alev, that's when he should scream and yell at the evil and use bitterness. How is it possible you in charge? How is it possible you stop me from socializing, from serving God, from doing what I'm supposed to? And by doing so, it allows the person to relinquish the godly soul to run his life. However, so the rabbi made one other point that we need to clarify. The rabbi is making sure that, as we studied, you use severity to fight evil by bitterness, by screaming and yelling at the evil that I'm not going to let you be in charge. When do we do that? Whenever we find it necessary, whenever we get sad, whenever I lose my mind, I lose my energy, I should use it to fight the evil. However, the Rebbe says there is another time when we do it. However, the appropriate time for this anger of the divine soul at the animal soul, meaning the time which is opportune and fitting for most people, is when one is in any case depressed over mundane matters, or just so without any discernible cause. Says the Rebbe, you know when another best time to do it? When you have a good reason to be sad. When someone is sitting Shiva and is very, very sad, take those moments and say, I have to be a better person. I need to convert that sadness into something good. Here is a story. One before I get the story. This is an opportune time for redirecting the depression towards spiritual matters, to be among the masters of accounts mentioned above, that is, to engage in a soul-searching and spiritual stock-taking. And I'm going to, the rabbi is continuing. I want to share with you a story. there was a elderly person who would come to Shabbat to synagogue, and he would give out candies, lollipops, or candies, sucking candies to children who shouted Amen when the Chazan said Kaddish. One time, by the way, when I was a child, there was a man. Unfortunately, he had only one daughter. She died. Very, very painful. It was a neighbor of mine, very well known. Today, when I go to Kfar Chabad, when I was just there, on Shabbat Friday night, I enjoy seeing there is a man there that he collects all these children. So today, today the synagogue is much larger. When I go up, the synagogue was so small, so they had assigned one table for children, because the parents didn't have a seat next to them for their children. There was not enough seats. So we would sit together, and the man in charge would say, if you say Amen and properly, you're going to get a candy. And that's what happens. Today, they allow the children to sit with the parents, but towards then, by Aleinu, you have few Kaddishes, one before Aleinu and two more after. That's when everybody gets together to that same table and that same corner, and it's loaded with kids. And they shout Amen that it sounds all over the building. And he gives them candies, he gives them tickets. Today, candy, a lollipop doesn't mean much. Anyway, so it started with a man very similar to the story I'm going to show it you. There was a man who used to give candies to children who shouted Amen very loud. Somebody once asked the man, why are you doing it? And the man shared the following. He says that during the Holocaust, he lost his wife and children, like many, untold number of people. Wife, children are all gone. When he survived, he came out from Europe, and he had decided that he's giving up on life. The pain of not having his wife and children did not allow him to continue life. So he's not going to get married. He's not going to have children because it's too painful what he went through. But somebody convinced him to go and visit the Rebbe. And so he went to visit the Rebbe, and in a private audience, he told the Rebbe that he had given up on life. Sadness, what we call sadness. He was very sad about his past. He had all the reasons to be sad, and it doesn't go away. He cannot let go of it. Today, if you tell somebody, snap out of it, they take you to court. They say you're abusing them. So you cannot snap out of it. So the Rebbe turned to him and he says, why are you so sad? Is this because of the memory of your wife and children? And he says, obviously. So the Rebbe says, you know, the reason that the memory caused you so much pain is because you had deep love for them. Is that true? You loved the children that you had. You loved the wife you had, correct? He says, obviously. So the Rebbe says to him, what a waste. Love. You love your wife and children so much. And what you do with it is sad, depressed. Why don't you take that love that for your wife and children and dedicate that love for bringing more love in the universe? Go find children who are coming to synagogue and give them a gift out of love to dedicate the love that you have for your wife and children. And he said, sure. And he said that the first Shabbat, he went with a bag in his jacket with candies. He couldn't bring himself to give out candies because he's a very depressed person. But a child saw that his jacket was a little bulging. He told him, said, you have candies? And he said, yeah. So he gave him a candy. He says, say blessing. And then it became easy. He says now he realized that the love for his wife and children that made him so sad is a reason for him to do more love in the universe, to love children, to show them how happy he is that they say a blessing, that they survived. And within a short while, he rebuilt his family. He started a new family. He has a wife, he has children, but he says the love that he's dedicating for his wife and children that died will never stop. And every Shabbat, he expresses it by making children smile. Yes?
Sometimes it's very hard to make a person who is sad turn around and become bitter and then use it as
To use it to
positive.
yeah, it's very sad, and that's the purpose of Tanya, by the way. The Tanya is there to
Are you going to
energize the
give us
person.
tips?
Yeah, well, here is one tip.
Yeah, but
The first is that's what we're talking about. So I'm sharing with you what the Rebbe told him, which I think is unbelievable. In other words, the Rebbe pointed out the reason he was sad is because of the deep love he had for his wife and children. And the Rebbe says to him, you are wasting that love. On what? And staying home and not doing anything. Why don't you use that love, express that love to other children? And it made sense to him. What the Rebbe did for him is actually turn sadness into bitterness. In other words, situation is bad. There is no dispute about the facts. The facts don't change. His wife and children will not come back. He is in a very, very tough spot. And no one is judging. You cannot judge somebody because it's foolish. However, what the goal the rabbi is telling us here is that sometimes in order for us to fight the evil is by using the same medicine, give them their own, give the evil its own medicine. Use bitterness to get angry at the evil and say, I'm not going to be despair. I'm not going to be hopeless. I am going to do something good. I am going to utilize whatever blessings I have and make sure I enjoy life. By doing so, you energize yourself to do even farther, to go farther and do much more than you did without. That's the point that the rabbi is making here. And to fulfill the previously mentioned teaching of our sages that one should always incite his good inclination against his evil inclination, since both of these paths harness the attributes of severity. He will thus also be rid of the depression brought on by mundane matters. So when someone is very sad, I wanted to buy something and I lost the bid on eBay. I wanted to buy a certain car and somebody else got it. And the color I liked for the car is not that color that I want to match the exterior of my home. There are many, many reasons to be sad, unfortunately, today, and we can't judge people. When one realizes that in order for us to live, serve God, allow the godly soul to rule, we need to get angry at the evil inclination. How do we do that? Taking sadness and converting it to bitterness. When do we do that? The first time is at a very few times, once a week, once a month, we need to do that. But another time, the Rebbe says, when you are anyway sad, either the dates. That's why when people sit Shiva, when there is a Shiva call and the rabbi comes, they ask the rabbi to speak. I'm sure you heard that. Why the rabbi has to speak? The rabbi is not the mourner. The rabbi is just like everybody else. The reason is because the mourners are sad anyway. You want them to take that sadness to a good place. So you want them to learn from the deceased, if it's their father or mother, if it's a sibling, you want them to learn from the person something good to energize them to remember him in a positive way. That's the purpose of saying a Dvar Torah, for saying teaching or speaking Torah message at the house of the mourners.
Found that this morning, one person talking about the deceased person, a lot of things come up, and it's all very positive. We don't need I'm not saying we're going to rabbi.
Just a minute. You have found that speaking about in the house of mourners about the deceased is
Uplifting, and other things about his past and so on.
and I'm explaining you that's very correct, but there is a deeper reason. One reason, as Harry mentioned, it's uplifting. The idea is not just uplifting. The idea is to redirect the sadness of the mourners into a positive, to channel it in a positive behavior. Because the person the person who's sitting Shiva sometimes are very, very sad. And by speaking about the deceased or a message from the Torah, what we do is we give them a channel to take that anger to take that sadness and turn it into, so to say, energize with bitterness and therefore do better. I should tell you, as a rabbi, sometimes I walk into a house or to a couple who lost a child, and this is a classical example I always share, and I do not say a single word because speaking there makes it worse. In other words, sadness it's such a depressing situation that anything you say will make it worse. I remember vividly there were a couple that had one child and they lost that child. They were members of another temple. And unfortunately, some rabbis, even though they are called rabbis, they're not that smart. Common sense is not always. And the brother-in-law called me out. And I walked in and I literally sat down and cried. It was very painful because I knew that young man. And after 15 minutes, I got up. And that's changed them. They joined us and they became very active. They became, not very, but that became their synagogue. And when I came home, Sarah asked me, what did you say? What can you tell someone who had one child and they lost that child? I said nothing. There was nothing I can say. So why did you go? She asked me. I says, sometimes just being there, you show them that it's very painful. We went on relationship, we studied. For years, they kept speaking that how special this rabbi is who was shown compassion. I didn't show any compassion other than just being there. I didn't speak. But that's what is asked of the participants. Sometimes you got to know when not to speak. I'm not going to speak about my personal experience on the other side as being a mourner, but all I'm going to say is back to your point. You say it should be uplifting. The mourners get uplifted when they when they hear stories of the deceased. That's great. I'm here to tell you that sometimes it's a Torah message, not necessarily the stories about the deceased. And the reason it's shared there, aside from other benefits, is to channel their anger, their sadness into bitterness. In other words, to motivate them to do something, to come and say Kaddish, etc. Yes, Harry, I'm sorry for...
Shiva call, just sit down and say nothing. Never start any conversation. Just sit there, just to show the person that you're paying the Shiva call.
You say the best thing to do, the best practice of a Shiva is to say nothing, right? How many people you know that practice this?
I do.
You do? You're the majority? Oh, you're the minority.
That's something you said yourself. You'll say, I'm sorry to hear about your Lord. You sit down and keep quiet.
That's it.
Start talking and then answer.
Shut up.
You are right on target. You're right.
They
But
come-
I'm here to tell you that people have no common sense.
No.
We did that in a relationship. How did he die? Did they say, what's the last words they said? Come on, anyway.
And they say, I know what you're feeling. Really?
Yeah,
Good,
right.
right? It's so bad.
That's what,
I
didn't
found
Job have a friend that came to visit and he just sat there, he didn't say a word?
That's it. His friends came to comfort him, and all they did is they sat around him. That's the best comfort.
find them, unless you've been there, to tell someone and how you feel, is so false.
Yeah,
Unless you've been there.
And even
All right.
then, it's all different.
fake.
I agree.
Let's study a little more. He will then, page 421, he will then arrive at a true joy. When you convert sadness into bitterness, it brings great joy. Why? As follows. In order to comfort his heart in double measure, let him, in the wake of the above words of truth concerning his lowly spiritual stature, tell himself the following. The comfort is dual, says, not only is his depression eliminated, but he will also attain a joy which he would never experience were it not for his earlier depression. Says the Rabbi, let him say, page 422, let him say to his heart, indeed, without a doubt, I'm far removed, utterly remote from God, and am despicable, contemptible, and so on. But all this is true only of me, that is, my body, and the animating soul within it. Yet within me there is a very veritable part of God which is present even in the most worthless of my fellows, so that even if I am not no better than he, I still have this part of God within me, namely the divine soul and the spark of godliness itself, clothed in it, animating it. In other words, a person, once he turns sadness into bitterness, there will be dual effect. A, he will be energized. B, it will bring him joy in his connection to God or connecting to life, because he will realize that all the sadness and all the what pulls him down is the body, not the soul. But the soul is pure and cannot be tainted. It's always pure. It is only that when the body and the animating soul are in such a lowly state, the divine soul is in exile within them. So, if so, then, on the contrary, the further I am removed from God, and the more despicable and contemptible, the deeper in exile is my divine soul, and all the more it to be pitied. Therefore, I will make it my entire aim and desire to extricate it from this exile and to return her to her father's house, that is, to restore it to its source and its original state as in her youth. Before, that is, as it was before being clothed in my body, when it was completely absorbed in God's light and united with it. Now, too, okay, before now too, I have a story and I have a good explanation to explain that. If you see a human being in a dumpster diving for food, how does it make you feel?
That.
Repulsive, right? You're very sad. You can't look at it. It's wrong, right? But if you see a cat in the dumpster, why are you laughing? Because you saw it, huh?
Not a big deal.
It's no big deal. It's not repulsive. It's not bad. Why? What's the difference? The bacteria is there with the whatever the whatever is in the disgusting parts of food that's in the dumpster. How come when the cat does it, it's okay. It can be my pet, and it does that, and just make sure the paws are clean, and then you can continue living with that cat. Why? The answer is the cat is on that level. It's an animal, but a human being should be sitting around the table and eating with a fork and spoon from a plate. Does that make sense, Herman?
Yes.
The body is a cat, is an animal. When the body is in the dungeon, not the dungeon meaning in a spiritual dumpster, getting angry at people, lying, staying away from God, it makes sense. That's where the cat belongs. The cat will go wherever you have bones. You put some bones in the dumpster, they'll go there. A human being don't belong there. If I'm angry, if I'm hungry, and I see and I smell the cholent in the dumpster, and I go and take it, you will say he's a subhuman. He's crazy.
Get sick.
So you're going to get sick. The godly soul do not belong in this misbehaving. The godly soul is pure, supposed to sit on a table with a plate and spoon. So whenever I'm depressed, and I have good reasons, because I'm far from God, because I'm unable to do whatever I did, because they kicked me out of a job. Whatever the reasons are, if I get depressed, it's only because the animal soul was involved in this. But the godly soul is always pure. The godly soul cannot be depressed. The godly soul is pure energy connected to God, cannot be removed from God. And therefore, I should turn this into on the other opposite and say, let not the body rule my godly soul, but the other way, godly soul rule the body. And therefore, I'm going to use whatever energy, whatever capability, whatever chance I have to try harder. And here is a short story. You know what? The story I'll save for next week. I want to read a little bit more. Let's move on.
We make the story.
Now, so make sure you're here next week, Gadol.
I know how you feel.
We will be here next week.
Now, God willing.
Yes.
Now too will it likewise be absorbed and united with him once again, when I concentrate all my aspirations on the Torah and the mitzvot in an effort to close therein all of the soul's 10 faculties, that is, by applying my mental faculties to Torah study and my emotive faculties to the performance of the mitzvot, with the vitality lent them by the love and fear of God, as explained above in chapter 4. Thus will my divine soul be reunited with God. In other words, don't allow your body to dictate how you live your life. It's like the cat in me will tell me, go to the dumpster and start digging for bones. It doesn't work like that. Allow your godly soul to say to you, it smells good over there, but it's dangerous. It's ugly. You need to sit by the table. Especially in fulfilling the mitzvah of prayer, will I try to release my divine soul by crying out to God because of the distress of its exile in my loathsome body, so that he releases it from captivity and binds it to himself. This service of God, in which one seeks to restore the soul to its source, is referred to as teshuva with good deeds. This is the best way to serve God. Let's read a little bit more. And the Alter Rebbe, what did he say? Okay. This denotes, I'm continuing the Rebbe's words in page 424. This denotes the good deeds which one does with the intention of returning to the soul, which is part of God, to the divine source and root of all the worlds. We're going to stop here, but I want to share with you a story, not the story I wanted to share. That's a story for next week, but there is another story. There were two brothers who decided to have a fight with each other. They became enemies to each other. One day, one of the brothers married off his daughter, and he felt bad that his brother is not going to show up. So he sent him an invitation with an RSVP card, and the RSVP card is not returned. So he called the guy, and the guy has an ID, phone ID, and he's not answering. So he's sending messages, and the messengers, he's sending people to tell the brother, come to my daughter's wedding. And the brother says, I'm not coming because I hate you, and we are enemies. Anybody knows the rest of the story? So the night of the wedding comes, and this hateful brother decides that no matter what, he's going to go to bed early. He's going to close the door, turn off the light, and put on pajamas and go under the blanket, so no one can change his mind to come to the wedding. So he puts on his pajamas, he says the Shema of bedtime, and he goes to bed. Meanwhile, the other brother, who is marrying off his daughter, turns to his son and he says, my brother is addicted to violin music, and you're a violinist. I want you to go and stay under the window of my brother's bedroom and start playing the violin. He will open the window to listen, and then you take a few steps back, so you should come downstairs to listen. And as he's starting to listen, walk back to the ballroom and bring him here. So the brother goes there with the violin and he starts playing. And of course, even though he covers himself with the blankets, the sound of violin, he couldn't resist. He opens the window, he sees, he goes downstairs, and his nephew, the young man, is walking backwards slowly until they show up to the ballroom. As soon as he comes to the ballroom, the other brother, the father of the bride, jumps on him and starts dancing, and they dance. The only problem is he's in his pajamas. So they danced the whole night because he didn't dance, he didn't see him for years. So he tricked them, and he's dancing the half an hour within pajamas. This guy is in tuxedo, and the other guy is in his pajamas, and they're dancing and dancing. That's why you gotta go to sleep with pajamas. In case someone is pulling you out. That's my lesson. But anyway, what's the message here? You know, I'm asking you, did the brother who came in pajamas do the right thing by showing up in pajamas or not?
Yes,
Haman says, yeah, Elizabeth. Why?
because he did the mitzvah of showing up.
Because he danced at the wedding, and who cares what he's wearing, right? Ah, as long as he's wearing something. Thank you. That's a very important lesson. I have some news for you. We all go to the ballroom in pajamas. Our evil inclination is our pajama. But God says, I don't care. Just show up. Just show up, even if you bring your pajamas with you. So whenever it comes to Shabbat, and the evil makes me sad, and I have no choice, and I don't want to get up from bed, but I do begrudgingly. God says, but at least you showed up. So you wear your pajamas, but be there. That's what the rabbi is saying here. Realize that the godly soul and the body are two entities. All that pulls you down, everything that makes you not live a life, is the body. You cannot get rid of the body because it's the tool by which you serve God. You cannot pray to God. You cannot eat matzah. You cannot eat kosher without the body. But don't let the body dictate the outcome. Don't say to yourself, I'm in pajamas, I shouldn't be at the wedding. Yeah, bring your body. Realize it's the godly soul. And use the very poison, the very medicine of the animals of the body against the body. Energize yourself and say, I'm going to be better. I'm going to make sure I don't fail. I'm going to make sure I have an impact on people. If I fail this way, I'll try another way. In this way, you have served God. And not only that, you went away from the dumpster into the table, because you're not listening to your body to be depressed, to be in charge, and no one else is as good as I am, and no one else is going to make me happy. But rather, you allow the godly soul to say, hey, you're around, because God wants, is counting on you. Hey, you're around. You're going to tell the body what to do, and not the body tells you what to do. And we'll conclude here, and next week. So we studied why sadness is wrong. It's a technique of the evil. We studied that there is something called bitterness and sadness. And we studied how to turn bitterness into sadness. Next week, we're going to talk about, God willing, the difference between hope and hopeless. No, I'm sorry if I said that. Turning sadness into bitterness. And we learn how, by taking appropriate times, either from time to time or when we are sad anyway and converted to bitterness, or by contemplating, using our brains to realize I should be there at the wedding even if I'm wearing a pajamas. Be well, everybody. We'll conclude here.
And show up and show with candy.